Okay, so it's 9:30. I'd like to call the meeting of the Electoral Area Services Committee of Wednesday, August 11th to order. If we have a confirmation of quorum, which I believe we do.
Move adoption with one additional recommendation for Area D on number 7, Mars, to come under new business, to request that the committee let me forward this to this afternoon's board meeting for consideration.
Yep. We'll deal with it then, and we'll just put it on the agenda for later. Yeah, okay. So this is the time when you put it on the agenda. Okay, and I also have a short motion concerning covenants to be added also.
And Mr. Chair, I'd ask that we vary the agenda and bring items I, 5, and J up to near the beginning of the agenda.
I'll second the agenda as amended for adoption.
Thank you.
Okay, are you talking I1?
Well, I1 is already near the beginning, so I just suggested I5 and J.
Okay. All right. Any other additions to the agenda? Okay, so could we have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Move approval as amended.
Second.
Any opposed? Good. Business arising. Nothing. Public considerations, nothing. Chair's report, nothing. Staff reports, what?
Well, there was.
Mr. Chairman, I think you missed the adoption of the minutes from the item E.
Yeah.
I guess I did. Okay. Adoption of previous meeting minutes.
Okay, move adoption with one correction, and that would be regarding the Marywood Road flooding. The two numbers referred to for the addresses are supposed to be 211 and 223, not 211 and 233, just so we don't send that letter off to the wrong, referring to the wrong address.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, so a motion to approve the minutes as adopted, or as amended, sorry. Is that in order, Tom, or do I have to approve the amendment first?
Mr. Chairman, the amendment first and then adoption, I believe.
Move the amendment.
Second.
Seconder. Any opposed? Okay, all those in favor of adoption of the previous meeting minutes as adopted, as amended, sorry.
Just say any opposed.
Any opposed? Okay, business arising from the minutes, anything?
We did that.
I like to do everything twice. Okay, public considerations, we have none. We have no chair's report. Staff reports, the very first one is development variance permit under I1, which is Olmsted. And the motion is that the board see of. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, maybe John could speak to this, Mr. Chair, before.
Okay, he can go under discussion. That would be great. Yeah. Go ahead, John.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As presented on June 16th, 2021, the application is to allow the construction of a proposed 62 square meter garage studio to be located 1.5 meters from the rear property line and 0 meters from the front property line. The application was referred to the Area B Advisory Planning Commission for comment, which recommended that the applicant pursue the option to close a portion of Nehallam Road with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure as an alternative to the proposed variance. That option has been explored, and the Ministry has stated that the road closure is not a viable option. And given that this has been checked out, the application is now being referred back to the Electoral Area Services Committee for consideration. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, John. Good info. Okay, so anything further on discussion of the CAO's report?
Yes, please.
Go ahead, Nova.
Thank you. A question to staff and then a little bit of information for the committee about the APC meeting. It seemed like in the report from staff that it was indeed staff that had made the outreach to Ministry of Highways. I'm not sure on the applicant's behalf or at the applicant's request or without the applicant's knowledge. I'm just trying to clarify whether that was an applicant-driven or staff-driven initiative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The applicant had initially reached out to the ministry and was told no, and staff then contacted the ministry directly to verify that that indeed was the case, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so a little bit of context, if I might, for the committee then. When this first came before the committee, I believe all or most of us had received direct communication from the applicant's neighbor, who is a fellow politician of ours. And it seemed at East that we were likely going to decline this application. And I really referred it to the APC just because the APC was meeting anyway, and I didn't think much of the referral. I expected the APC wouldn't come up with much. And it was one of those moments where I learned the real value of local dialogue and indeed the commissions. Both the applicant and the neighbor were there in person, and it was a real kind of fence mending a bit between two neighbors that had a very awkward relationship, I think, for a long time. And one of the APC members is a retired surveyor, and there was much really fruitful discussion around the partial road closure. So my understanding is the applicant had originally approached the ministry to close the road entirely, which I don't think is supportable. What came forward in the discussion was the idea to take a tiny portion, like, I don't know, 50 feet by 8 feet or something of the road and close it. And that seemed something that would be a very viable option to pursue. And the applicant was really keen on pursuing it themselves. I warmed more to the application than I expected to, given that it's a very constrained lot and they're kind of almost, you know, suburban lot sizes where you can't expect complete privacy one from the other. So what I would like to do is just ask that we defer this pending further communication from the applicant, because it was indeed the applicant that was keen to reach out to Ministry of Highways directly, and I wouldn't want to take that opportunity away from them by doing it ourselves. So after receipt, I would just move that, please.
Okay, anything else on the CAO's report? Any opposed?
I think Brenda.
Brenda, did you have someone?
Well, I just wanted to say that deferring this again for another month isn't really fair. It creates a lot of tension. The next door neighbor, I understood, was our politician's mother. And they were very, very opposed. The mother was very opposed to this with a 0 setback and a 1.5 from the rear property line. And, you know, the planner has already told us he's approached Highways. Highways is not willing to deal with the road. So I think we should deal with this today and not drag it out any longer. So I'll be voting against any deferral motion.
Well, we're still on receipt. Go
Okay.
ahead on receipt. On receipt,
So
Nova?
So thank you. Just further to that, the road is a completely undeveloped road, just for context, for the committee. It goes through a swamp and ends on a bluff. So it's not a road that the public, I don't expect, is ever going to use. And just on the other side of the neighbor, there is a fully developed and signed public beach access. So it's not like it's a really active access. I concur that the neighbor was very opposed in communications with us. At the APC meeting, when they were both in person, there was much softening and willing to cooperate on something together. There had been a number of sort of issues between the neighbors. So I think actually deferring this is the wish of both the applicant and the neighbor, who wanted to take a look at alternative options before them. And we have not heard back from them about their committed further investigation. Thank you.
Okay, anything further on receipt? Any opposed? Okay, it's been received. And then you want to make a subsequent?
I would move that this matter be deferred until we receive future or further communication from the applicant.
Second.
Okay. Okay, and speaking on the deferral, as chair, if I may, from the chair,
Go ahead.
I'd be opposed to a deferral at this time, dealing with highways. To do what is being requested is basically, no pun intended, dead end road. There's no way that's going to happen, and it will take a good year to have them say no. So I certainly would not want to be deferring this time after time after time. I think we should just deal with it at this point. So I'm against the deferral. Any other speakers? Okay, on the deferral. All those in favor of deferral? Any opposed? I'm sorry.
Well,
Any opposed? Any opposed to deferral?
Lee opposed.
Abram opposed. That it?
Yep.
Okay,
so I would then move B, that the committee recommend that the development variance permit DV 1B21 Olmsted is attached to the CO's report be approved.
Second.
Okay, and are there speakers to this?
I will be voting no
Well-
to this. If I can speak, Mr. Chair, Director Lee. I'll be voting
Yeah,
no.
Go ahead, Brenda.
Okay, a setback of 0 at the front of the property is an affront to the bylaw. And if this is a rural area, it should be 4.5 meters according to the bylaw. And 1.5 from the rear property line is also a big, affront to the bylaw. And I think that this should be turned down because it's not a principal building and it's not necessary to do this and to disturb the neighbors. So I'm voting no.
Okay, anyone else?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So I really awkward, really didn't want to be in this position today because I think there's more information that could be in front of the committee and indeed the neighborhood for consideration here. I actually don't have any concern with the 0 setback on the road. It's not going to be a road that anybody is realistically going to use, and the neighbor on the other side's house is a very far distance away and had no concern. That's not actually of concern to anyone, not even the neighbor who had concern. The neighbor who had concern about the reduced setback adjacent to their property line, which is which is valid. There was discussion about whether the archaeological covenant might be amended, which the neighbor has indeed done when the house was built in that archaeological covenanted area. Neither the applicant nor the neighbor really thought that was a great idea to do. And so this is effectively the only place on the property that can be built on, shy of digging into the archaeologically covenanted area, which is not a wise thing to do. So given all of that, in this awkward position, I'm going to be in support of this application. I think having an outbuilding is reasonable. But I really wish we weren't here. Thank you.
Okay, any further speakers before I speak? I may from the chair, or shall I step down?
Just stay in the chair.
Okay, so first of all, I think this is far more complex of an issue than something that should be done as a development variance permit application. It should have been something else, rezoning, whatever, I don't know. But it's too complex for development variance. I do not agree with the setbacks approved and with the highways issue and all of the other things that were brought forward before us. So I'm going to be voting against approval. Okay, any further speakers? Okay, anyone opposed?
Lee?
Abel?
Gerald.
Did you say Gerald?
I didn't say anything. I'm in favor.
Oh, okay, I heard somebody say something. Okay, so we have 2 opposed.
Correct.
So it's defeated. Is that correct?
Yep. Excuse me.
Okay.
Number 5.
What was the
I
next
believe-
one?
I believe number
Okay,
5.
on your list. Okay. Cortez.
Tanker.
Yeah, Cortez Island Superior Taker Shuttle Service Study.
Move receipt.
CO we received.
Move receipt.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I think Sean will speak to this.
Okay, Sean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the Electoral Area Services Committee. Attached is a staff report as well as the full STSS feasibility study completed by our consultant about the next steps for portions of the island to be STSS accredited under the Cortez Island Fire Department. And there's 2 options presented in this report: that we hold back and wait to hear from the public, or that we proceed with a further report that would discuss the financial and governance implications of proceeding with this accreditation.
Okay, is there any discussion from directors?
Yes.
Nobody?
Thank you. I haven't had a full look at this report yet, which I would really like to do before making option 2. I would like to be able to discuss this further with the fire department. I understand historically the interests of the regional district and outside agencies to bring the fire service in-house. I can tell you that that would be so vehemently opposed on the island. I don't really want to open that up right now until I have a further discussion with the fire department. So I'm just going to ask that we defer this matter for a month to next EASC so that I can talk this over with the fire department here.
Okay, so you're moving deferral without
Well, after receipt.
either of the. Okay,
After-
I'm on receipt, might as well get that out of
Mr. Chair,
the, after receipt, all those, well, that's true. The motions that were suggested were in the item which is in the receipt of the report. So I'm not quite sure, what do I do here, Tom? Just receive the report and then
Mr. Chairman, you do have a motion on the floor to receive the report. You could do that if there's no further debate on receipt. And then if a director wishes to offer a deferral motion, then the committee can consider that.
okay, we'll go with Tom's wisdom here. So on receipt, any opposed? So that's carried. And
So I'd like to
is there a substitute?
move deferral for a month.
Mr. Chair, I would second that, but on the point of order, what exactly are we deferring?
That's what I was just going to ask.
Just that, that this report come back again in a month's time for our consideration, just that the whole matter be returned to us next month after, so I've got a chance to look into it and talk to the fire department.
Maybe the motion should be that it come back to us in a month.
Correct.
Okay, would you
Whatever
like to
Tom
change the motion?
advises.
Okay, so could you state for the record what the motion is then?
I thought deferral was that, but if you would like it worded differently, I would move that this matter be returned to EASC in September.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on that? Anyone opposed? It's carried.
Thank you.
Okay, next one you wanted was
J.
J bylaws 44, 34, and 435.
Move receipt of CO's report.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Anyone opposed? That's carried.
I have some discussion here.
You have what, sorry?
I have
You broke
some,
up there.
some discussions, questions to staff.
Okay, this is discussions on the receipt of the report.
Correct. So I was just,
Okay.
I've been in touch with the applicant a couple of times since the Advisory Planning Commission meeting a month ago. And I was under the understanding that the applicant had submitted a revised application to staff. So I phoned the applicant this morning and she forwarded me an email that was sent to John Neal this past Wednesday, August 4th, with a revised application that has a map that's much clearer with 8 house sites and the wording changed from 7 to 8 and some other matters that just made the application much clearer. And so I would like that revised application to get forwarded to board, but that's not in front of us. So I'm asking through to staff why that revised application isn't in front of us and if that's something that can be forwarded to board at the next board meeting, or what's advised at this point, given the situation.
Mr. Chair, I think John's best to answer that.
Hey, John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What this report deals with is the requirement for the application to be considered by the Area B Advisory and Planning Commission. And the Advisory Planning Commission did come forward with several recommendations. And these recommendations are included in this staff report, which was dated August 4th, 2021. And so the Commission recommendations are to remove mention of the 7 dwellings, to allow for 8 dwellings, to remove mention of the old mill site, industrial use, and to register a right-of-way guaranteeing public access through the Treedom Ventures property to Hanks Beach and the park. And staff is working with the applicant to address the question of the statutory right-of-way designation over the property. And that's why this application is coming forward now for first and second readings and authorization to hold a public hearing. Mr. Chairman.
So my question stands then is, why don't we have before us the revised application that was revised based on the APC commentary and submitted to staff last week? The revised application doesn't include the statutory right-of-way, which I think ultimately the public will request a public hearing, and I think that I would be much more inclined to support it with a statutory right-of-way. However, that's not what the applicant is submitting at this time, and so fair enough. But the applicant has submitted a revised application, and I don't want this to go to board and then, you know, and then it's not the right thing at board. So I'm wondering, is it possible? First, why don't we have the revised application before us? And secondary, is it possible, given that EASC hasn't seen the revised application, to make a motion that that revised application that staff have received be the one that be forwarded to board? It's not massively different. It's cleaner and simpler based on the APC's commentary.
Okay, John, do you want to take a stab at that? I have something to say about it
I
myself,
think I might
but go
defer
ahead.
to my managers on that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, John's managers, whomever you may be. Monaco.
Thank you through the chair. It's my understanding that the revised application does not have implications on the overall change to the bylaw itself, which is why we didn't include the revised plan as part of this staff report. As John mentioned, the staff report is primarily to address the requests of the APC. When staff have clear information from the applicant with respect to the right-of-way request, that will be provided to the board and at public hearing for the public's consideration as part of that application. Again, it's my understanding that the change in references to the language that was initially in the application has no implication on the overall bylaw amendment, which is why it was omitted today. Thank you.
So if I might, a final time, Mr. Chair, I completely concur with staff that there is no change to what is being sought. There is a rezoning from one to another, and those designations are the same. However, for the clarity of the public and the board, and indeed this committee, I would like us to be able to be working with the revised map, which shows 8 sites, not 11 or something. So it's a whole lot clearer, and some revised language. So I'm comfortable moving this forward today if we can have some assurance that when it comes to board, the revised application will be submitted. And at this point, it's not the applicant's wish to provide that right-of-way, which I think is an unfortunate error, but that is their call. So if I move as recommended today, will the revised application come before board next time?
Thank you through the chair to the director. What will be provided when we go to board is a revised site plan and a revised applicant's brief.
Thank you.
May I ask
Okay,
a question, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, with the OCP amendment as part of this package, which is increasing the number of dwellings, does that legalize it for other situations where there's too many dwellings on a property? Would it automatically legalize illegal situations?
Through the chair, I hope I understand your question correctly, Director Lee. This amendment relates only to this site. So this is
Site specific, it won't affect other issues?
I don't want to use site specific in this instance, but this rezoning is particular to this property only and would affect no other properties on Cortez.
Okay.
Any other people want to speak before I do? Okay, so I wouldn't say totally, but partially confused, since we don't have the actual what's going to move forward in the end before us. I don't see, first of all, how we can, as an Electoral Area Services Committee, recommend that this go forward and then bring forward something else. That seems to me to be totally just counterintuitive. Secondly, statutory right-of-way is, if this is a subdivision, not sure if that's being called a subdivision. I have to go back and read it.
It's not.
Again, it's not being called a subdivision, but passage through is being talked about doing with the statutory right-of-way, which, as Annika knows, we've had many problems with statutory right-of-ways in Area C, and I don't anticipate that we would not have problems at some time statutory right-of-way in Area B. So I'm just wondering why, we aren't talking about dedicated highway or dedicated, ministry portion of the property. If you're talking of whatever it is, 7, 8, 11 properties that are all going to be wanting access of some sort, whether it be to a utility or whether it be to a roadway or whatever. I just think it's really poor planning to come forward to our committee with an application that is no longer the application, make a recommendation on doing it, and then bringing a different application to the board, which we have not said, this is what we recommend to the board. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. So I can't support this. I want to see what it is we're actually voting on. And this isn't it.
Mr. Chair, I would move to defer this entire matter to the next EASC meeting and request that staff bring us back the complete and up-to-date information that we need to see to be able to vote on this.
Second.
Okay,
Under the
seconded.
understanding that that information includes the revised application.
Okay, well, I think the wording that Brenda used inferred that it would be the complete and up-to-date information. So, okay, is there anyone that would just like to speak to the deferral? Seeing none, are there any opposed to the deferral? That's carried.
But
Okay.
I think, Mr. Chair, we go back to item 2.
Item 2, development variance permit application for CAL
Okay.
report receipt.
The receipt. Second.
And Mr. Chair, I think
Moved and
John will
seconded.
speak to this for us.
Okay, John, you're up again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application is to allow the proposed construction of a 127 square meter shop, 6.6 meters in height and located in accordance with the setback requirements of the zoning bylaw. The 10% height variance has been requested to allow the new shop to accommodate a car hoist for personal use, as well as for the storage of recreational equipment such as a boat. And apart from building height, all other zoning setback and lot coverage requirements on the property have been observed. And our office is in support of this proposal, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. This is Area D. Has there been any response from adjacent property owners regarding a referral on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that question. No responses have been received from neighbours.
Okay. Then we've received, so I'll move the recommendation B.
Mr.
We
Chairman,
have
I think you're still in receipt, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, we
Okay.
are.
Okay.
Okay, and on receipt, if I may ask, John, when you say no comments have been received from neighboring properties, how far are the neighboring properties from the property line of this, or the building itself?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, do you mean at what distance did I circulate, or how far are the buildings from this structure?
Our circulation bylaws are very, very minimal. And I'm wondering, does the circulation boundary even go off the property? I don't know how big of a property this is, sorry.
Oh, yeah, it's 50 meters. So basically it includes properties on all sides. I think I circulated about 11 properties.
Okay,
both
that's
across
great.
the road and to the back and either side. Chairman.
So everybody that's affected by the view have been notified. Great.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, Brenda, go ahead.
Okay, so
First,
after we vote
did
on
we finish
receipt,
okay, on receipt. Anyone opposed? Carried, onward.
move B.
Brenda,
Move B, that the committee recommend the development variance permit for Crute and as presented in the staff report dated August 3rd to be approved, and that the corporate officer be authorized to issue the permit.
Second.
any discussion? Anyone opposed? It's carried. Okay, on to fire protection service proposal, Race Point, Duncan Bay, Gordon Road.
Move receipt.
Receipt of,
Second.
Mr. Chair, Sean will speak to this.
okay,
Through the chair to the Electoral Area Services Committee. So we received 26 responses from the 65 letters that we sent out to residents in these areas of Electoral Area A, which just boundary with the city of Campbell River. All but one respondent was opposed to the regional district conducting further information on this, such as the costs and answering their questions that they had, response time, where will the water come from that provides the service, possible effect on insurance ratings. So due to the overwhelming support we received from the responses and receiving nearly a 50% response rate, we're requesting your consent to recommend to the board that the regional district pursue this matter further and do some more investigation.
okay, could you tell me the numbers again? I'm sorry, on the number of people surveyed and I believe you said most of them were opposed?
No.
Maybe I got that wrong.
You are the chair, so through the chair to the chair, we sent out 65 letters We received
Right.
26 responses, either through a letter back or our online survey, and 25 were in favor. Only one
We're
was
in favor.
opposed.
I'm sorry, I thought you said they were opposed. Okay, moving forward. On receipt of the report, anything else? All those in favor of receipt? Opposed?
No, I'm-
Or sorry. All those propose, anyone opposed? No, you aren't? Okay, it's received. So,
Okay. I'll move
and
out
we have
recommendation, the report to examine potential costs and other issues in relation to the proposal for fire protection service be prepared for its consideration.
wouldn't it be for East's consideration before it goes to board?
Doesn't matter to me.
Well, I think it should go to East first.
Well, it just delays the whole schmodel.
Yeah, the schmozzle will take a long time anyway, so I think it should go through the proper channels.
okay, are you going to make an amendment to that, or is this a friendly? What are we talking?
I'll go with what Gerald wants for his area, but I'm just saying that
I'll let it.
it's,
I have no problem with it.
okay,
Okay, so Gerald's leaving it as written before you. Any further discussion? Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Number 4, Sayward Valley Fire Services Review.
Move
Report
receipt.
from the CA.
second for receipt.
Mr.
Moved
Chair,
and second.
Sean will speak to this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to the Electoral Area Services Committee, we recently completed a governance review on the Sayward Valley Fire Protection Service. The report and a number of options are listed in front of you. Similar to the Cortez report beforehand, you'll notice that staff are not choosing a specific option at this point in time. We realize that this report just became public to you on Friday. So if you would like to take an option to roll with it, by all means, but for right now, it's presented just for a receipt to give the option to review it further in more detail.
I have a comment, Mr. Chair.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, in regard to the consultant report, unfortunately, there's several errors there. And I'll just point out that this is generally the cause of the consultant not speaking with people in the valley who are longtime residents who know the valley situation. If they had spoken with me as the director, I could certainly have clarified some things. But anyway, some of the points that the consultant made were that the valley would have to recruit volunteers. The consultant may not realize that the vast majority of volunteers are Sayward Valley volunteers, not village volunteers. So yes, we'd have to add a couple, not very many. The second thing was that the valley would have to acquire first responder and road rescue equipment. I don't think that's true. The valley doesn't need first responder and road rescue equipment if the village is already going to continue that service. We don't need two separate agencies in the same location responding to the same incident. It wouldn't make sense. If the valley was to, or if the village wasn't going to continue with that service, well, then we could acquire their equipment. If they were going to continue, we don't need it. Third point was, it says the fire station is suitable to support a new fire department. However, its location in a flood zone is essentially problematic. This also isn't true. When a typical high water occurs, perhaps a couple of days a year, the Sayward Road is blocked just south of the fire hall. So a fire truck would have to go around on the logging road. You can make the loop and get back to the highway that way in the other end of the valley. But on the other hand, if the fire hall was located somewhere else, like say at the south end of the valley, and there was that same flood, then the fire truck would have to go all around the exact same logging road to access the north end of the valley. It doesn't make any difference where the fire hall is. The fire hall itself isn't likely to flood, never has. Now, in the event of an unusually high flood level, then the logging road becomes inaccessible. Even the village can't reach the highway. So none of the Sayward Valley is acceptable. That's just the way it is. So, like I said, if the consultants had asked somebody who knew, it would have resolved all those poor statements they put in there. And yes, they consulted with the chief and assistant chief. They don't know. That's the problem. Okay, and then just a couple more points here. On negotiating with the village, there was a statement in the consultant's report that said, presumably, the starting point negotiations would be the cost allocation framework in place under the current service arrangement, which assigns operating costs on the basis approximately of incident numbers. Again, totally not true. When this was originally set up, it had absolutely nothing to do with incidence numbers. It was based on the approximate population split, 60-40. That would be the basis to continue on the negotiation. So the one last thing the guy really messed up was in figure 6.1, the options he lists have completely reversed what was in the body of the report. Option C becomes B, B becomes A becomes C. So it's all messed up there. But anyway, Mr. Chair, it's kind of irrelevant, those comments. I have a subsequent motion I'd like to bring after receipt.
Okay, anything further on receipt of the report?
Mr. Chair, I have a question, and my question is, why would Area A support an SRD service which more than doubles the cost to the Sayward Valley residents and delegate decision-making to the entire board? This is lunatic, and I think you should leave things as they are. They've been working. There's no problems. I mean, not that there aren't any problems, but I think there's more problems if you go the rate of doubling the cost. So, especially not asking any Sayward Valley residents about it. So I'm really cold to this idea. I know what it's like to be a single service on the regional board, and it's pretty brutal. And it takes away all the decision-making from the director of the area. So I would say no to this. If I was Gerald, I'd say no, drop it right now.
Mr. Chair, if I might reply to Director Lee. Director Lee never suggested that I would accept that option. So you'll have to wait to hear my motion.
Okay. And it's just my
Okay, so-
question, why would Sayward Valley people support this? I don't see why they would support a doubling of their costs and the decision-making power being taken away from their director.
Okay, you've made your point, and on receipt, any further discussion? Receipt has passed. There were no opposed. Okay, so then Gerald, you said you had a subsequent motion.
I do, Mr. Chair. Just Edith is going to put that
I
up.
believe he has.
So I would move that staff investigate in more detail the concept of a sub-regional service model for fire protection through the regional district. This is option D of the staff report. And if I might have a seconder, I'll comment on that.
I'll second.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, there's several options in the staff report. I believe that this is the best one. This will be a joint service with the village if it was approved. That would give the mayor of Sayward or the representative from Sayward on the regional district and myself equal say in the service. Most of the decisions would be made, because it's not a single participant service, by the two of us. There's a few that the board would have decisions on, financial things, which would always be the case anyway. The current situation is that I have zero say. I pay 60% of all the firefighting costs in the village and valley and have zero say. So this would be a definite improvement. I think we should pursue discussions on it. Thank you.
Question?
Okay. So the motion is to investigate more detailed concept, not to proceed with anything.
That's correct.
Correct? Okay. Any further discussion on it? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Okay, so we can move on to number 6, long-range land use planning overview. Report from the CAO will be received.
Mercy. Second.
Mr. Chair, Annika will speak to this.
Thank you through the chair to the committee. Staff was asked to provide an overview of long-range planning for our electoral areas. As you can see by the staff report provided, we have approximately 14 regulatory and policy documents that guide our work in planning services. These bylaws provide these services to all electoral areas, some jointly, some in particular to specific EAs. Although there's no requirement to update any of these bylaws in a prescribed way, we do amend them frequently through applications to the board and at times undertake more complex reviews, although on a less frequent basis. Currently, our internal planning resources are directed towards the review of the Cortez Island zoning bylaw, the integrated community sustainability plan for electoral area C, and the update to the planning and procedures and fees bylaw. We're currently working through these bylaws with the staff that we currently have on hand, including our manager of planning and our planner 1. This will be supported through the addition of our planner 2, which we're currently in recruitment for, and will continue through 2022. Of course, worth noting is that the ability to maintain our focus on these bylaws are subject to the availability of our staff resources and the number and complexity of applications that we receive throughout the year, as well as those priorities identified by the electoral area directors and the board. This is provided for your information. Thank you.
I have a question.
Thank you. Go ahead, Gerald.
Thank you. To Annika, is there any progress on the Cayucot Community Hall?
Other than our high-level initial assessment, we have not moved forward to a design build RFP to date.
Did that answer your question, Gerald?
I'll talk privately further on it with staff.
Okay, Nova, saw your hand.
Thanks. Yeah, I believe it was myself that initiated the request for this back in December, I believe. And unfortunately, I haven't learned anything new here. I'm aware of how old our planning bylaws are, and I'm aware that we are, in theory, working on the Cortez zoning bylaw review and the Area C ICSP. What I was really hoping for was a serious grapple with how we could put into place a plan to update these, I would call antiquated documents. I understand that there's no regulation to require their update, but my understanding, and I would need to go and try to find what legislation it is that it's recommended that they be updated every 5 years. I would submit that that's far too aggressive of a timeline, but 30 years I just doesn't cut it at all for me. And so what I was really hoping from staff was some kind of recommendation about how we could actually get to comprehensive updates of our planning documents, or OCPs and zoning bylaws throughout the region, and recommendations about either increased revenue or increased staff or increased something to be able to address these. The zoning bylaw review for Cortez has been on the work plan for a decade or more. I'm not aware of any substantive work that's happened on it since we were at public hearing 3 years ago. I would love to know if it's actually substantively being worked on in any way. Similarly, I'd really love a substantive update of the Area C integrated community plan. That's been a long time coming, and I know the director from the area has really asked for updates. I would love to see something before us here. It leaves the social profit community here and the public here grappling with how it can try to update these things on our own, which is certainly not the intention of creating regional districts whose legislative authority it is to do these long-range planning. I also then would ask that 3 years ago or so, there was a resolution made at this board to do some specific updates to the Cortez OCP around light industrial land, for instance. That hasn't come back to the board at all since, and I wonder where that lands in this. So when there's specific direction from the board around some specific targeted updates to some of these plans, is that being tracked by staff? And I would hope that some of those would be reflected in this report. So I guess I'm just wondering, what would it take for us collectively, and I don't mean to point fingers at anybody, it's a organizational failure. What would it take between us as politicians and management to have a real serious think about how we can address these multi-decade old plans and bring them up to date? Because it's not fair to our constituents, I would submit.
I have a comment, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Dave had his hand up first, so I'm going to take him.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just going to address some things at a high level. A plan is exactly that. It's just a plan. And Director Anderson says, you know, what would it take? It takes sticking to a plan. What we do at the board and committee constantly is we come up with new shiny objects every meeting, and you keep piling on that. Whether you bring your own issues as an area director, we have bylaw issues, we have investigations, we have lawsuits, we have applications. You can't stick to a plan and then veer off it constantly. So what would it take? It takes a plan, it takes strategic initiatives and sticking to that. But every meeting, when you come up with 4 or 5 new resolutions, directions for staff, that it gets meandered off of. So we take it on a priority basis. So there's things that are out of staff's control that we address on an ongoing basis based on the resources and the priorities that the board has given us. You can't make everything 20 things top priority, and you can't keep bringing things to the table that are out of our control and take away staff resources and then say, how do we stick to this plan?
Hey, Gerald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Area A has a handful of community plans, and I recognize that updating these OCPs can be extremely expensive, as we've seen in the past. Area A has zero interest in updating any of its community plans unless the public seriously demands it. Just to update a plan because it's old doesn't make sense. A lot of those old plans are just as valid as the day they were put in. The criteria that the people wanted there is still the way they feel about it. So the concept of updating a plan because it's 20, 30 years old to me just doesn't make any sense. Plus, the cost involved is a burden on taxpayers, especially in these days when a lot of people have been out of work for a long time and some still are. So it just doesn't make sense.
Okay, and Nova, I see your hand again. If I could, before you do speak, as a first-time speaker, I'll step down if you'd like.
Doesn't matter.
Okay, and I'll speak from the chair. Dave asked the question about, you know, how do we make this happen? Novavax. How do we make this happen? Well, one of the first things that has to happen, in my view, is that we need to have collaboration between staff and directors. And we have eliminated that with our code of conduct bylaw and made it very difficult for us to speak with our senior staff and our other staff about what things really do need to be changed and what things really don't need to be changed. I too do not believe that just the age is enough. I think it's a matter of the demographics and the dynamics of a community that drive what we need to do. And if we can't discuss that with our staff in a meaningful, open discussion, then basically we're just saying to staff, here's the plan, go out and implement it. And then, like Dave said, every other meeting, throwing 20 more things at them to add to it. If we had that discussion prior to that, we as directors wouldn't be coming forward every EA meeting saying, we want you to look at this, we want you to look at that, and so on. Because we would have already said, these kinds of things are what we need you to be assisting us with in running our communities. We can't run our communities the way that we're doing it right now. Our regional district is somewhat broken in that manner, as far as the I'll call it use collaboration again between staff and directors. If we had more of that, staff would know better when something comes in as to whether or not it's worth spending a whole hell of a lot of time on, or whether or not there should be some discussion about it before moving forward. Whether it's with applicants, directors, board, committee, whatever. But if we're going to work as one big happy family, then let's start working as one big happy family. We're not right now. So go ahead. I think, Nova, you said you were next. Second time. Sorry, you're muted.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more with what you just said, Director Abram. Thank you for speaking articulately to that. Not to belabor general points, just one comment and then one really specific question. I hear our CAO say that we can't get to long-range planning review because there's so much day-to-day stuff happening. That will always be the case, that there's day-to-day stuff happening. That is the nature of our business. And so I'd really love to hear from senior staff what it would take, what additional resources, what additional staffing it would take to be able to get at some of these long-range planning matters, because I believe we owe it. And perhaps not all of them need to have full comprehensive updates, but we keep running into situations where we've got specific applications before us that clearly indicate that these plans were written in a totally different era. They're written when I was in high school, before climate change was a thing, before density was a thing, before affordable housing was a thing. We owe it to do that. So my really big picture question to staff is, what would it take structurally to resource staffing in such a way that we could address these and not have them constantly be competing with the day-to-day work? And secondly, I will reiterate a question I asked the first time. Could we please have an update here verbally, because I'm not going to ask for another many months for a written update. Could we please have a verbal update from staff about those two items that are being actively worked on right now, the Cortez zoning bylaw and the Area C ISP? Where are we at with them? What's actually happening with them in a real way? Could we hear?
Mr. Chair,
You want to
well, I'll address a couple of things that were brought up. First of all, I just want to remind the committee that we are a board. Staff take direction from the board. When you speak about working together, staff take direction via resolution. We nor the directors are given the authority to individually give direction to staff. We are a resource of the board. If the East directors want to go to the board and have that authority delegated to them, but that is the bylaw. These are the policies that we are working within. Until those are changed and that authority is delegated to you, I can't do anything about that. Director Anderson says, what would it take? It takes discipline from the individual directors to stick to the plan. There's things that we're out of control of that directors bring. FOI requests, bylaw complaints, updates on them, legal issues. We are not in control. So what does it take? I'm not in control of any of those being brought forward, but the directors are. So if you can discipline yourself and stick to those things, then we can create a plan. But if we can't, then I can't guarantee anything. How are we to guarantee that we can deliver on these things when we have these other issues brought forward by the directors, which is fine. We're happy to do that by resolution. And then we have this backlog of other issues. Like it takes discipline. It's not really terribly complicated.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. We have 3 or 4 staff, and they have put forward a plan to work on the Cortez zoning bylaw and finish the Quadra sustainability plan and review the planning fees and charges. That's a lot to do for 3 or 4 staff. And we already have a good jump on the Cortez zoning bylaw because we already went to public hearing and the staff had put forward a complete overhaul of the Cortez zoning bylaw. And there were some things the public said absolutely no to. So it was sent back to staff, but there should be only a few things they need to update on that. And then I don't know about the Quadra sustainability plan, how much work that's going to take, but we're like 3/4 of the way through the year. So let's just run with what they're suggesting. I'm not in a big hurry unless I see a plan that for Area D that is better than what we already have. I won't vote for it. So, you know, no point in doing Area D again. We've done it. We've tried couple times since the original OCP, and the original OCP was better than both other attempts. So we're fine. I just.
Okay, Gerald, is that you flashing? Are you putting your hand up or?
No?
Okay, your symbol was flashing on and off. Okay, if I could just add something to some of the comments that have been made concerning the, was just mentioned again by Brenda, about the ICSP for Area C. I don't see any work for planning in that because I don't hear anything about it. And we are already a full year beyond the deadline that they gave us, that they would be presenting their plan to us last June, a year ago, June. And we haven't received anything that I know of. If we have, how come I haven't seen it? That ICSP was instituted for 3 reasons. This was what we were told. 3 reasons. The Outer Islands Rural Land Use Bylaw complete redo, so that we would have an OCP and a bylaw separate for the Outer Islands, which is, you know, everything, Reed, Morel, blah, blah, blah. And it was to kick off a review of the OCP and the zoning bylaw for Area C in general. That's why we were doing the ICSP and why we awarded 70 grand to Dillon Consultants. And so far, I am extremely disappointed in the work that has been done. And if they haven't done any work, well, that's something for staff to take up with them, the board to take up with them. But if they haven't done any work to give back our planners, then there couldn't very well be any work being done by our planners on it. So I'm just saying it can't be taking up too much of their time. As far as Cortez is concerned, I have no idea what they're doing with Cortez. That's between Cortez and staff. But we have things like the implementation of the Surge Narrows Village project on Wharf et cetera, that have been sitting on hold with numerous agencies, including Flinro and Highways and Environment and all these other places, us not being able to say anything to them because we don't have our ICSB back yet to tell us what we're going to do with their zoning OCP information. So, you know, the things that Dave mentions about we have to have discipline. Well, I'm sorry, but I agree. We have to be disciplined, but we have to have a plan to be disciplined too. And right now we don't have a plan. Our plan is, you know, we're going to try and do all these things, but like Dave said, daily, we get bylaw complaints, we get rezonings, we get new proposals, we get court actions, we get this, we get that. We can't control that as directors. We have no way of controlling that. That comes in to staff to talk about. You know, if a developer came forward to a director and said, I'm going to apply for 100 lots in your area, and I'm going to go to staff with it. Well, there could be some discussion there, and then they could go forward with it, and you know, everything would be tickety-boo. And staff would have to have the discipline to say, you know what, we have a plan here, and our plan is to work on these regulatory frameworks, and as soon as we get, you know, into those, we'll get to your application. But just because you asked for it doesn't mean we have to do it today. That's the way I look at it right now. It seems like the regional district is being driven by the public. And I don't think that's correct. I think it's supposed to be driven, as Dave said, by the plan. But we don't have a plan. So I'm at a loss. And I'm not, you know, I say all of this with all due respect, Dave. I'm not, you know, trying to say that the regional district isn't doing its work. You're working your butts off. All of you. I know that. I know it from talking to you and talking to others that everybody there is putting out 100% plus. We just don't have enough resources to deal with the changing world. The world has totally changed in the past 20 years, and we can't keep up with it at this pace. We either need more resources, more contracting, fewer acceptances of things coming in. I don't know, something. But yes, as Director Anderson mentioned, I was sort of looking for what might a planning overview look like in the way of a future discussion. It doesn't have to take place today. It could be another time. You know, we could set up a whole meeting just on that one particular topic. So who was next? I'm sorry for yammering on. Dave, I believe your hand is up.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, Mr. Chair, those are great comments. You know, really appreciate it. So I think a couple things out of it. One, we can bring back a report to the next EASC, and it's what we were planning to do on the Cortez zoning bylaw, on the Area C ICFP. Part of, and you know, Director Lee provided some great comments, and so did Director Wally, is that you're all not on the same page, which is fine. You don't have to be. But, you know, this is kind of what we came, you know, with this report saying, okay, you know, where are you? Let's get some input, and then we'll focus it on that. But, you know, just to be devil's advocate, and I don't want to belabor this because we could go on all day about this, but, you know, maybe you and Director Anderson are saying, let's focus on these plans. Director Lee says she's happy with her plans. She wants to serve the public and their applications and all this. So, and I respect it all, but we're not on the same page. And so we're trying to bring something and flush that out. I think we've had great conversation here, and we'll huddle and we'll bring something back again in September. And if we need a special meeting to dissect this a little farther, we'll do that. So you may not feel like this has been that, you know, progressive, but it actually has, right? You know, Director Lee, Director Wallace saying, I don't want this, I want you to do this. it may be in contradiction to what you want, but it is clarity to us. So I'll certainly focus something a little more direct on the ICSP and the Cortez zoning bylaw. And then we're also going to bring something in total of that big picture so that the four of you can kind of, you know, have some more debate when it comes to priorities. And you say, and I'm just being devil's advocate, you say, Director Abram, that you want to focus on planning, and Director Lee says, I want to focus more on public. So then we say, okay, look, how are we going to integrate these things? So I think it's you know, great discussion. Appreciate the comments, and I think we're good right now. I think we served the purpose of what we were trying to do with this report, just instigate some dialogue.
Thank you, Dave. And I'd just like to say, I rather than taking up a lot of time at this meeting, I took your report, your CAO report, and went through it. And then at the end of it, I just listed some, what is it, 6, 8 topics of what I'm looking for in Area C. But rather than belabor the conversation here,
Sure.
I just wrote them out and sent them to Edie. So, you know, Edie can share that with planning and with you. And, you know, maybe that's something that you can, you know, consider incorporating into your upcoming reports.
Yeah, and I think we've all
But I've already done that. I've already done that.
Yeah, no, that's great. Appreciate it. And I think we've just discovered it's a bit of a process, and you know, we're working on bringing some clarity and, you know, some unification to, you know, all the directors too, that you all want something a little bit different, which is fine, how we bring that all together. So appreciate the discussion.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Is there any further discussion on this?
Yes, I have one more comment. Some new information, or possibly new to some people. The Comox Valley yesterday just passed a blanket zoning bylaw for areas A, B, and C in the Comox Valley. And they designated all types of land use and sizes, and they did a blanket rezone of the Comox Valley. And they did it strategically in that they got government grant support to do a, what do they call it, regional growth strategy. They started with that. So they've got the whole board at the CVRD has a regional growth strategy. So they're identifying where growth is allowed to go and where it isn't. And then from that, they did local area plans. And that's where they designated Saratoga as a major development mode, which I never agreed with, but I don't get to vote on that. So, because I don't believe we have enough water for that, but they put it into their plan yesterday and they adopted it. So that said, they ran on a ton of government grant money for each stage of their planning, and they all work together, and they have much more homogeneous areas in A, B, and C compared to the north of the Oyster, where we have 2 islands and 1 large electoral area next to Campbell River, and then Sayward with only the Menzies Bay plan and not much other planning in Sayward. So, you know, we've got a more difficult terrain to navigate, but I think we should be able to have a strategic session with the planners and the administration on how to go about doing the plans we need to do or want to do, and getting grant assistance to do them, because we can't do all these things with just 3 or 4 staff. They have a fleet of staff in the Comox Valley in planning. You know, so we need to get more resources. Like the chair said, we need more resources. How we get those is, you know, deciding strategically what we want to focus on, and then making grant applications and moving forward that way. So I'm just watching what Comox Valley's doing.
I'd like to interject something. Brenda, you were there. you would remember one of the reasons that we were split as a regional district came from the implementation of a regional growth strategy, all of this homogeneous talk about A, B, C, D, et cetera, in the Comox Valley. That was not the wish of north of the Oyster, and we fought about it continuously. I think you'll remember that. And we talk about grant money. That grant money comes with a ball and chain, always, no matter what it is. And if it's planning our areas, forget it. I'd get out my bolt cutters. So
Well, I'm
that
fine
can be a
however,
discussion for.
yeah, I'm fine
It's
however
not-
you want to go, but I'm just saying that, and it is shocking to see the plan that goes south of the Oyster in Black Creek. It's shocking to see all the density they've put in there. And then you look across the river to the north and there's farmland. You know, Area D
Yeah, well,
is just wide open.
That's why they are there and we are here. So
Yeah.
let's just move on. Okay,
Yeah,
and we can
and it
talk
takes
about.
a lot of fighting to keep it that way. You know, it's a lot harder to keep your area rural than it is to let it go to the developers.
Okay, moving on. Tom, what do we have to do? We got a receipt or anything here? Vote?
You have a motion currently on the floor to receive the report, and that's not been voted on yet.
Okay, anyone opposed to receipt of the report? Wonderful. Okay, we're on to item 7, request for financial assistance, Mountain Avian Air Rescue Society. And I believe this is the one that you also have.
Yeah,
Your
I have a
attachment
little
to?
extra on, yeah. Move receipt of the report.
Second.
Anyone opposed?
And then
Receipt.
I think I sent in a written motion to Edie. She can put it up.
Mr. Chairman, I think it would be in order for the committee to make a recommendation, and then if they wish to, as a subsequent, recommend some action today by the board, that would be a more
Okay.
appropriate process.
Okay, so I'll move
Suggest-
that the grant need for Mary D be approved and that subsequent to the, and then the next motion would be subsequent to that.
Be a subsequent motion. Okay, so on B. Mover,
Brenda?
Brenda, you moving that?
Yes.
Second,
Second.
Gerald. Any discussion? Any opposed? Passed. Now your subsequent motion.
Subsequent,
Edie, can you put that up? Just let Edie put it up on the board.
okay.
You don't need to read it.
It's the and part. It's the last part because we already approved the first part. No,
Okay.
the subsequent would be that the recommendation for the grant need be forward to this afternoon's SRD board under new business. And I checked
Okay,
this with
so this
Edie.
is,
Yeah, I checked
this is a
this out.
site
Yeah,
normally do, but there's no
Yeah.
reason why, as far as I know, that we can't ask that it happen. So.
Yeah.
There it is.
I have
Yeah.
a question, Mr. Chair.
Okay, everybody read it? Okay, question,
Sure.
Gerald, go ahead.
Yeah, under new business at the board, this won't be on the agenda. Why not just bring it up as new business at the board meeting?
I will, but I thought it was politic to let the committee know that I wanted to do that because it is not our normal procedure. But the reason I wanted to go today to the board is that Mars is appealing to the public in the press and you know, in all the newspapers in the Comox Valley and up here that they've got an overflow of especially eagles that were suffering from the heat and falling out of their nests and whatnot. And they've got, I think they've got 11 eagles at the moment and lots of other animals, and they're running out of food for them. And they're requesting the public help them by sending in cash donations. So I thought it would, and food donations. So I thought it would be a good idea to expedite the grant and aid request, since they put it in February.
Okay.
Okay, I
And
think I understand your reason for doing it, Brenda. The question, I believe, was more about just process. And I think the fact that you're doing it here puts it on the record that this committee agreed that, yes, we should go forward at today's board meeting if that's what we decide. And then you still have to bring it forward at the board meeting.
right,
And it will then be reported a second time that it's been done. Okay,
Yep.
so let's just stick to the subsequent right now, the subsequents before you. Is there any discussion on it?
I'll second it, by the way.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that would be a good idea. Okay. Discussion? Anyone opposed? None opposed? Okay, so that is being recommended to go forward to the board today. Brenda, it will still be up to you to bring it forward at the beginning
Yeah.
on the agenda. Except that you would like it added without commentary, just added to new business.
I've already sent my written motions in to Brad Unger and Edie for the
Yeah, and I
board.
saw Brad's that
Yeah.
basically said he had no problem with it. So I think we're good and we can move on to item 8, request for financial assistance, Royal Canadian Legion Sayward branch.
Move receipt.
Second,
Any discussion? Anyone opposed? Carried. On to B.
Move B, that the committee recommend that a grant and aid for the Royal Canadian Legion Sayward branch, the amount of $1,000 be approved to assist with the 2021 Secret Santa program to be paid from the Electoral aid grant and aid budget.
second,
Good to see you spending some of your money, Gerald.
Mhm.
Okay, anyone opposed? That's passed. On to J, bylaws. Bylaw number 43435.
We've done this one.
We did that
This
one.
one has,
as deferred.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay, and I had one, that's right. Okay, Dave, do you have, or Edie, do you have that motion
You
that
did.
put forward?
Yeah, I think it was the Canish View Estate CD there, the resolution.
This was approved under new business to put this forward, and there it is. So can I get somebody to please move this?
I'll move it.
Seconder,
Thank you.
Lee,
Under. Okay, and if you want any discussion, you can do that. Quick explanation. 180 acres was subdivided many years ago. Using the density averaging, et cetera. The 180 acres wanted to be divided into 18 properties. That's 10 acres each. That met the bylaw. And it required 18 smaller lots along the water in Canish Bay and one large lot to remain as a single remainder. Now, and it had a no subdivision clause on it. Now, the owners of that property, who are the same owners that bought it way back then, have decided that they want to try and subdivide the remainder, which is not the intent of the bylaw originally. And so we're having to seek legal opinion. This is one of those things that directors throw out there at staff to say, hey, stop what you're doing and do my stuff. Sorry, guys. Okay. Any further discussion on it?
I have a question, Mr. Chair. Have we actually received, has planning actually received an application from Canish View to start carving up the property?
It's my understanding they have not, nor has Highways as far as we know. But this is to be ahead of the curve. We want to be prepared for when they do.
Okay.
Because they're going door to door in the neighborhood telling people that that's what they're going to do. So that's how this came up.
If I may, Mr.
So
Chair.
in answer to your question, no.
Yeah, and if I may, Mr. Chair, you're correct. Planning hasn't received anything to date. Thank you.
Thank you, Annika. Okay. Anyone opposed or any further discussion? Sorry. Anyone opposed? That's passed. Okay. So then that brings us to termination.
Move termination.
Seconder we don't need, so we're terminated.
Okay.
Oh, all
see
those in
ya.
favor?
Anyone
or anybody
opposed?
opposed? Anyone opposed? I'm going to cut you off. Okay.